So starting with a quick review today of how questions work. We talked about yes/no questions yesterday, and we learned that basic yes or no questions in French are put together the same way as a sentence. We start with the subject, then we have the verb, and then any other information that we need in there. So our examples were tu fais du vélo, il joue au volley, vous parlez français, and we remember that we simply need to put a question mark at the end and raise our voice, and that's what tells us that it's asking rather than telling. So that's how we do yes/no questions. But of course, conversation would be really boring if everything was a yes or no question. So today, we're going to talk about open-ended questions. And open-ended questions are questions that ask for information, something other than a yes or a no. And really all we need to know for this is that to make an open-ended question, we're going to add a question word or phrase to the end, and that's what's going to be different here. So what that will look like in terms of our formula is exactly the same as we had before: our subject, then our verb, then whatever other information we might need, and then we're going to add our question word or phrase to the end of the question before our question mark. So we're going to take those same questions that we had before, but instead of yes/no questions, we're going to add a question phrase to them. So our examples would be tu fais du vélo quand? You go biking when? Il joue au volley où? He plays volleyball where? Vous parlez français avec qui? You speak French with whom? Now, these are actually really easy to put together. What's difficult about this for us is that most of the time when we think of questions in English, we think about starting with the question phrase. We would probably ask, when do you go biking? Or where do you play volleyball? And there is a way of putting together questions where the question word goes at the beginning, but it's a little bit different structure. So we're going to start with this one because in my opinion, it's the easiest way to put together questions. So our structure is exactly like we had before with yes/no questions, which is exactly the same as sentences. We're just going to stick our question word at the end. So in order for us to be able to do this, we have to make sure that we understand question words. And these are question words. Most of these you've seen and used at some point during the year so far. So what I want you to do is pause here for a second and see if you can figure out what those question words are asking. Go ahead and fill in the English meaning for any of them that you know on the line. And then when you've come up with as much as you can get, we'll go through them together. So qui means who or whom. I'm not going to get into the difference between the two of them, but in the videos you will hear me use them correctly. So qui means who or whom. So vous parlez français avec qui means you speak French with whom. So on these lines, I'm going to be writing an example using each of those phrases, and I would suggest that maybe you write that same example down for yourself so that you have it and can use it as a reference. This one, quoi, we haven't seen very much. Quoi means what. So, vous parlez quoi would be asking you speak what. And of course, français would be the answer to that question. So what do you speak? Vous parlez quoi? You speak what? Quand is when. Vous parlez français quand? So you speak French when. When do you speak French? I speak French when I am speaking to Madame. The word quel means which, and quel is spelled Q-U-E-L, but it is an adjective, meaning it's a word that describes a noun. And we learned this with colors earlier in the year, that adjectives have to match whatever they describe. So if quel is going along with a word that is feminine, it's going to become feminine by adding an L-E to the end. If quel is going with a word that's plural, it needs to become plural by adding an S to the end. So this is something that we'll practice a little bit more next year in French too, but I just want you to understand why I have those letters in parentheses. Those are words that we can add on to the base form quel. And I have a little blank line here because when you use quel, you are probably going to be using it with another word following. So for example, vous parlez quelle langue? You speak which languages? Because langue is feminine and plural, notice how my quelle became feminine and plural. We had an L-E and an S to the end. Où veut dire where. Vous parlez français où? You speak French where? Je parle français à l'école. I speak French at school. Pourquoi veut dire why. Vous parlez français pourquoi? You speak French why. Why do you speak French? Je parle français parce que j'étudie le français. I speak French because I'm studying French. Comment, we're probably not going to use a whole lot right now, but you have seen this in several different questions. Comment means how. So, vous parlez français comment? How do you speak French? Je parle français bien. I speak French well. And combien. Combien, which is quite often going to be followed by de as a connector if we have another word following it. Combien means how many or how much. In English, we have two different phrases depending on whether it's something that we would measure or something that we count. In French, it's all the same idea. And if we would have another word following, that's where we use that word de of as a connector between the two parts. So I might say, vous parlez combien de langues? You speak how many languages? But I need the de as the connector between combien and langue. Okay? So these are all of the different question words and phrases that I want you to know right now. Notice that when we put them together in our question, every question begins the same way. They all begin with vous parlez, and then most of them have the français in there as well. And then our question word or our question phrase goes at the very end. That's the structure we're following. So yesterday, if you remember the simple questions that we put together, I still have my text on there. There we go. If you remember the simple questions that we put together, we talked about how we don't need that word at the beginning. We're just putting it together as subject, verb, other information. And we formed some simple questions. And then after we figured out how to form the simple questions, we turned those into more complicated questions by adding more detail to the end. Okay, we're going to take those same questions today, but now instead of yes/no questions, we're going to turn them into open-ended questions. So if you have your notes from the previous day, that would be really useful to you today to just kind of keep going, because you already know how to ask, do you want to play soccer with me? We're just going to add the concept of where. You already know how to ask, are we going to go shopping at the mall? We're simply going to add the idea of when to each of those questions. Now, remember, the trick is that in English, we would usually put that question word at the beginning, but in French, that question word or question phrase is going to go at the very end. Okay? So we'll do the first one together, just kind of like we did yesterday. Do you want, or where do you want to play soccer with me? We're going to ignore the where for right now. We're going to start with the basic idea. Do you want to play soccer? That's tu veux jouer au foot. The with me is avec moi. We had that from yesterday. We're just going to put our ou at the end of the question. Tu veux jouer au football avec moi ou? Where do you want to play soccer with me? Okay, so 4 more questions in that format. You just need to remember that your question word or phrase is going to go at the end. Pause here and work on those. So numéro 2, when are we going to go shopping at the mall? We start with, we are going to go shopping. Nous allons faire les magasins at the mall, au centre commercial. When? Quand. Our quand goes at the very end of the question. Nous allons faire les magasins au centre commercial quand? With whom do they like to go skiing in winter? We start with they like, ils aiment, go skiing, faire du ski, in winter, en hiver, and then we add avec qui at the end. Ils aiment faire du ski en hiver avec qui? Numéro 4. Why does Madame speak French every day? So we start with Madame speaks French. Madame parle français. Every day, tous les jours. And then why is pourquoi. Madame parle français tous les jours. Pourquoi? Madame speaks French every day. Why? And the last one. Which homework don't y'all do? This was our negative question. So since it's y'all, we're using the vous form. So we say, vous ne faites pas, you don't do. And then we're going to say, quel devoir. Okay, instead of faire les devoirs, les is the homework. We're going to replace the with quel for which homework. So, vous ne faites pas quel devoir. Quel has an S at the end because devoir has an S at the end. Now, devoir doesn't necessarily have to be plural. If this was singular, just ending with an R, then this would also be singular, just ending in an L. And that would be okay also. You just have to make sure that these two words match. Okay, so same questions we looked at yesterday, but now we're just adding a question word. And the tricky part that you need to remember is that whereas we typically start with the question word in English, if you're following this format, you're just going to stick the question word at the end in French. Now, there is one exception to that rule because, of course, it's French, so there's always going to be an exception. The exception to that rule is that qui, the word for who, can be the subject. So you can put that at the beginning. So in this case, qui goes, like I said, at the beginning of the question. That is our subject. Then we put the verb. Now, if qui is our subject, we need to know how are we going to conjugate our verb. If qui is our subject, the verb goes in the il, elle, or on form. Okay, so in this case, it has kind of its own little formula that looks like this: qui plus verb plus other. And our question word and our subject are really the same thing. So if I want to know who goes biking, I simply ask qui fait du vélo. If I want to know who plays volleyball, I ask qui joue au volley. If I want to know who speaks French, I ask qui parle français. So since who is essentially the person doing the action, who does, who plays, who speaks, qui goes at the beginning, and then our verb, notice our verb in all of these, fait, joue, parle, our verb is always in the il, elle, on form. So qui is a little bit different if we're asking who, that's how we put that together.